There's a moment in life when everything stops making sense, when the climb feels endless, the noise unbearable, and the person staring back at you in the mirror feels like a stranger. 1 year ago, a man stood at that exact crossroads. He had the career, the income, the social media followers, the weekend plans that looked perfect in photos. But inside, he was hollow, exhausted, running on fumes of who he thought he was supposed to be. And then he made a decision that everyone around him called crazy. He gave it all up, not for a month, not for a sabbatical, for an entire year. What happened next didn't just change his life. It revealed a truth about success, happiness, and what it really means to be alive. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll see your own life differently. His name doesn't matter because his story could be anyone's. It could be yours. At 32, he looked successful on paper. A 6-figure salary in tech, an apartment in the city that cost more than most people's annual income, a calendar so packed he had to schedule time to breathe. But here's what nobody saw: the panic attacks in the office bathroom, the sleepless nights scrolling through his phone until 3 in the morning, feeling nothing, the relationships that withered because he was always too busy, too tired, too absent. He had climbed the mountain everyone told him to climb, and when he reached the top, he realized it was the wrong mountain entirely. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday. He was in back-to-back meetings, nodding at presentations that meant nothing to him, when something inside him just cracked. Not dramatically, quietly, like a hairline fracture that had been forming for years finally split wide open. He walked out of that office, and he knew he couldn't go back. Not to that job, not to that life, not to pretending anymore. So he did something that terrified him more than staying would have. He quit everything. He resigned from his job with no backup plan. He cancelled his expensive lease and moved into a tiny studio on the outskirts of town. He deleted social media from his phone. He stopped seeing people who only knew the performance version of him. He gave himself 1 year to figure out who he actually was beneath all the noise, all the expectations, all the armor he'd been wearing since he didn't know when. The first month was brutal. Not because of what he lost, but because of the silence. When you remove all the distractions you've been using to run from yourself, you're finally forced to sit with everything you've been avoiding. The fear, the shame, the voice that whispers you're not enough. He cried more in those 30 days than he had in the previous 10 years. But something shifted when he stopped fighting those feelings and just let them be there. He started walking. Every morning, before the sun came up, he'd walk through his neighborhood with no destination, no podcast in his ears, no agenda. Just him and his thoughts. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, those thoughts got quieter, not silent, but softer, less aggressive. He began to notice things. The way light hit the trees at dawn, the sound of his own breathing, how good it felt to be tired from moving his body instead of exhausted from anxiety. He started reading again. Not self-help books or business manuals, but novels and poetry that reminded him what it felt like to feel. He volunteered at a community center teaching kids to code, and for the first time in years, his skills felt meaningful instead of transactional. He cooked real meals. He sat on his floor and did nothing. And the strangest thing happened. He didn't feel like he was wasting time. He felt like he was finally spending it. Around month 4, people started asking when he was going back to normal. Normal, that word haunted him because he realized normal had been killing him slowly. So he didn't go back. He went deeper. He confronted the beliefs that had been driving him into the ground. The belief that his worth was tied to his productivity. That rest was laziness. That saying no meant he was selfish. That vulnerability was weakness. He started therapy, real therapy, where he didn't perform or deflect but actually showed up broken and willing to heal. He journaled every night. Not about goals or gratitude lists, but about the truth. The messy, uncomfortable, liberating truth of what he felt and needed and feared. He learned to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. To be alone without being lonely. To measure a good day not by what he accomplished, but by how present he was. By month 8, something remarkable happened. He didn't recognize the person he'd become, but in the best possible way. He was calmer, more grounded. He laughed easier. He cried easier too. He could hold eye contact without his mind racing 3 steps ahead. He stopped needing to prove anything to anyone, including himself. And people noticed. Old friends reached out saying there was something different about him. Not that he seemed happier, though he did, but that he seemed real. Whole, like he'd come back from somewhere far away. He'd come back from a life that looked right but felt wrong. And he'd found one that might not look impressive to anyone else, but felt like home. The year ended, and he had a choice. Go back to what paid well, or stay with what felt true. He chose truth. Not because it was easy or certain or applaudable, but because he'd spent 12 months learning that the only prison worse than failure is success in a life you don't actually want. He started freelancing, making less money, but controlling his time. He kept the small apartment. He stayed off social media. He protected his mornings and his solitude like they were sacred, because they were. Here's what he learned that might change everything for you too. First, giving up what's not serving you isn't quitting, it's clarity. Second, the life everyone expects you to want might be the exact life that destroys you. Third, you cannot heal what you will not feel. Fourth, success without peace is just expensive suffering. And fifth, the most radical thing you can do in a world that profits from your self-doubt is to actually like who you are. So here's my question for you. What would you give up if you knew it would give you back to yourself? What noise could you turn off? What mountain are you climbing that you don't even want to be on? You don't need a year. You just need to start today. One choice, one brave, honest, terrifying choice to stop living for applause and start living for aliveness. Because the world doesn't need another version of you trying to be impressive. It needs the version of you that's finally, courageously, beautifully real.